The Denver Broncos already had one of the best cornerback rooms in the NFL. And then they went and drafted another one in the first round of the draft. What's going on, Broncos country? Gage Madrid here, Denver Broncos Syndicate. Welcome to our second positional deep dive video of the 2025 season, where we go in depth on each position group for the Denver Broncos, assess their strengths, assess their weaknesses, and determine how they're going to contribute to the roster in 2025. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the cornerback room, which is arguably the deepest on the Denver Broncos roster, outside of maybe the edge rush room, which is going to be in a later episode. But before we do that, guys, I wanted to take a moment to thank you guys so much. We hit 6,000 subscribers today, a huge accomplishment here on the channel. If you guys have yet to subscribe to the channel, I would really appreciate it. It's a free and easy way to show your support. If you're already subscribed, liking the video is another free and easy way to support. Also, if you want to go above and beyond in supporting the channel, we have launched memberships here on the channel. We have a $2.99 and a $4.99 a month tier if you guys are so interested. Not mandatory whatsoever, obviously, but if you guys want to go above and beyond in supporting the channel, you now have that option to do so with channel memberships. Details down below. But without further ado, guys, let's go ahead and get into the depth chart for this 2025 Denver Broncos cornerback room. Of course, we would be remiss if we didn't start things off with the reigning Defensive Player of the Year, Mr. Pat Certan II himself. It's hard to believe that we're already entering year 5 of the Pat Certan experience here in Denver, and he's just 25 years old, so we still have a lot more great years of Pat Certan's career ahead of him. But last season was truly a season of all-time great cornerback years. I mean, it really was. He had just 62 targets last year that he allowed, 38 completions allowed on those 62 targets, 61.3% completion, 8.6 yards per completion allowed, 5.3 yards per target allowed, and only 2 touchdowns allowed on the season. A true shutdown corner type of year. Pat Certan is the first cornerback to win Defensive Player of the Year since 2019 when Stephon Gilmore did it. And honestly, this is a season that really cements himself among the greatest corners, certainly in Denver Broncos history, up there with Champ Bailey and company, but also some of the greatest corners in NFL history. Pat Certan is on a Hall of Fame type of trajectory if he keeps this up, and now he's got an even better supporting cast around him on defense. Dare I say that Certan could be in line for an even bigger season in 2025. It's no secret that the Denver Broncos play a lot of man coverage. Ever since the middle of 2023, they made a philosophical shift away from the Vic Fangio defenses and more towards Vance Joseph's cover 1, cover 3 heavy style of scheme, and Pat Certan has thrived in it. Last season, Certan had 217 snaps in man coverage, which was the 5th most in the NFL, and he still was absolutely locked down throughout the entire year. He was able to maintain that consistent level of production when he was one-on-one, mano-a-mano, true shutdown stuff, man. Now, this is a metric that definitely caught me by surprise, and this is definitely why I can understand some people's disdain for Pro Football Focus. Certan, despite having a really good year in man coverage and having all those man coverage snaps, only ranked as the 21st best corner in terms of PFF grades in man coverage. He had a 67.3 PFF coverage grade in man. That's a little bit fishy to me, I'm not going to lie. I think that Pat Certan, in terms of the tape, put together a much better year than that. I'm not 100% sure how PFF goes about their grading system with coverage, but I feel like the eye test was certainly better than that. And that's why you have to combine stats, film, all of it together in order to get a clear picture on what you're trying to assess. Because sometimes the stats lie, sometimes the film might lie too. You've got to combine it all together and use your eyes to determine what you are seeing. And that is definitely the case here with Pat Certan and his PFF grade. They loved him in zone coverage, however. He had 339 zone coverage snaps last year, 21st in the NFL, and he had an 89.8 PFF zone coverage grade. So, despite his apparent shortcomings, I use that in heavy quotations, in man coverage per PFF, they really thought he was great in zone. So Pat Certan obviously looking to build on a really great season from last year, and barring injury, I do expect him to do that. But now we move on to the other spot alongside Pat Certan on the boundary. Who is going to be the second outside corner for the Denver Broncos? Riley Moss or Jaden Baron? When the draft happened, the Denver Broncos did not expect Baron, who was the best corner not named Travis Hunter, to be available with the 20th overall pick. He was, and they pounced on that. But I don't believe that this was an indictment whatsoever on Riley Moss. Riley Moss is still viewed very favorably in the eyes of the Denver Broncos, and I believe he's still going to be the starting outside boundary corner alongside Pat Certan for the Denver Broncos. There may be certain situations when the Denver Broncos are in base defense and only have two corners on the field where Jaden Baron may be alongside Pat Certan and Riley Moss might come off the field. But I don't think when the Broncos are in nickel that Riley Moss is going to be in the slot and Baron's going to be on the outside. Maybe in certain packages, but more often than not, I believe it's going to be Baron at nickel and then Riley Moss on the outside on the boundary alongside Pat Certan. That's just my belief. We'll get further confirmation of that as we get into training camp and we get to see it with our own eyes. But Riley Moss had a really good year last year in his first year as a starter for the Denver Broncos. And playing alongside Pat Certan, you are going to get targeted a crap ton. Moss was targeted 103 times last year. He allowed 67 completions on those 103 targets, so a 65.0 completion percentage allowed, 11.1 yards per completion, 7.3 yards per target, and he allowed 4 touchdowns as well. Again, man, when you're playing alongside the best shutdown corner in the NFL, you're going to have the spotlight on you a ton. And Riley Moss certainly stepped up, having to cover some of the best wide receivers in the NFL. And he did struggle in certain games out there. You think about the Bengals game, which was nationally televised. Moss was going up against T. Higgins in that game, who would be a number one receiver on any other team. So Riley Moss, despite having that spotlight on him at all times, I thought stepped up really well for the Broncos. He had 198 man coverage snaps last year, 13th most in the NFL. Again, the Broncos played a lot of man coverage. 53.8 PFF coverage grade in man. I mentioned the metric, but it is a little bit fishy. We talked about that with Pat Certan. Zone coverage, he was quite solid. 275 zone coverage snaps, 77.7 PFF zone coverage grade. I thought that the tape kind of indicated that he was pretty good in zone. I thought that he had some moments where he was in his right spot. He wasn't vacating his zone too early. He wasn't giving up big plays in zone coverage. So I thought that that metric definitely passed the smell test. I think that Riley Moss is still going to be a really good player on the boundary for the Denver Broncos. Now let's talk about the Jaden Baron side of things. And just like I said earlier, the Denver Broncos were pleasantly surprised when Baron was available for the taking with the 20th overall pick. He's very much a luxury pick for the Denver Broncos. But he's going to now slide in and provide them an upgrade at the nickel position over Jaquan McMillan. And I thought McMillan still played really solid last year. We'll talk about him after we're done talking about Baron. But Baron's going to step into that nickel role for the Broncos predominantly. Again, he might get a few snaps here and there on the boundary, but he's going to thrive really well at that nickel position in my opinion. He had 110 snaps from the nickel last year in 2024. 57 targets overall at all positions, 32 receptions allowed, a 56.1 completion percentage allowed, 7.8 yards per reception allowed at Texas last year, no touchdowns allowed. One thing, though, is he is going to have to transition to a bit of a different scheme than what he played at Texas. Texas played a heavy zone coverage scheme. He had 310 zone coverage snaps last year, and he had just 78 man coverage snaps. But he did play well in those man coverage snaps, and the Broncos were confident enough in what they saw that they felt that he would indeed fit their scheme. Again, it's just kind of a matter of get a good football player, and we'll figure out the schematic stuff later on. He had a 90.9 PFF zone coverage grade last year, which was the second best across all college corners in the country. A 70.8 PFF man coverage grade. Do with that what you will, but still a really solid number in my opinion. Baron moved all over the place for Texas during his tenure there. He played in the slot, he played on the outside, he blitzed, he kind of did a little bit of everything. He was almost like a joker on the defensive side of the ball, and he might be the same thing here in Denver, sort of a joker on the defensive side of the ball. And just like I said with Jaquan McMillan, I don't think that he had as bad of a year as some people are saying. I thought that he was still a more than competent starting level nickel corner for the Denver Broncos and had some really nice games for them. He also had a couple of poor games as well. I think about the Indianapolis game, that one immediately comes to mind, but made some big time plays, some game winning plays for the Denver Broncos last year, had the game winning pick six against the Cleveland Browns on Monday Night Football. He was targeted 101 times last year, predominantly in the slot. 65 receptions allowed, 64.4 completion percentage allowed, 10.6 yards per completion, 6.8 yards per target allowed, and 3 touchdowns allowed. He wasn't terrible. He really wasn't. He had a 61.1 PFF coverage grade in man on 199 snaps. That's the 12th most man coverage snaps across boundary corners and slot corners in the NFL. 315 zone coverage snaps, 64.7 PFF grade in zone. McMillan wasn't this terrible, awful player. The Denver Broncos were probably expecting to have Jaquan as a starter going into this year, but again, Baron fell to them, and that shook things up. Would it surprise me if some Week 1 trade materialized for Jaquan McMillan? No, it really wouldn't, because I just don't think that there's a spot for him on the roster. He can't really play dime in 6 defensive back sets because he's simply too small. He doesn't have the body type for it. But I do think that he could be a starting nickel corner somewhere else, and maybe the Denver Broncos could flip him for a draft pick, especially because they've got some really good depth behind McMillan, especially Chris Abrams-Draine, who I think could step up into that backup nickel role. Abrams-Draine did get one start for the Denver Broncos last year. It was the game at the Chargers. He came in relief of Levi Wallace on that embarrassing Monday night game against the Cleveland Browns, where Wallace gave up over 200 yards receiving to Jerry Jeudy. Abrams-Draine comes in, and he certainly at least looks more competent out there than what Levi Wallace provided. And I thought that he played pretty damn well in that one start that he got. He had an interception on the goal line against Justin Herbert. 16 targets, 7 receptions allowed on those 16 targets, 43.8% completion allowed, 12.1 yards per completion, just 5.3 yards per target. 22% of his snaps came in man coverage in that game, 20 snaps overall. He had a 71.7 PFF grade in man. 58.2% of his snaps came in zone coverage, so 53 of them total, 77.2 PFF grade in zone. I really liked Chris Abrams-Draine coming out, and I was really excited when the Denver Broncos drafted him in 2024 in the 5th round out of Missouri. I think that he could potentially be the long-term backup nickel for the Denver Broncos and maybe even a potential backup boundary corner. He brings versatility where he can play both of those positions. I really like Chris Abrams-Draine, and if the Denver Broncos were going to move on from Jaquan McMillan, then I think Chris Abrams-Draine could step in and play really well in that role. Now we're going to be moving into some of the more backup players in this cornerback room, and I do want to at least mention Damari Mathis here, the former 4th round pick back in 2022, entering his 4th year with the Broncos. He had 80 defensive snaps in Denver in 2024 after completely flaming out as a starter in 2023. We thought that Mathis was going to be a really good player for us after his rookie season. Unfortunately, the Broncos came in with a new regime, changed the scheme, and Mathis just doesn't look like he fits. I feel like Damari Mathis, if he is going to stick around here in Denver, it's going to be as a special teams player. He played 122 special team snaps in 2024. But if I'm being completely honest, if the Denver Broncos need to make a cut at some point early on in training camp, Damari Mathis might be that guy who is on the roster bubble. So it is for that reason that I think that Damari Mathis's days are numbered here in Denver. Now, finally moving into some of the developmental, undrafted free agent type players for the Denver Broncos. We've got Quentin Newsome and Reese Taylor, who were on the roster last year. Newsome did not get any snaps whatsoever for the Broncos in 2024. Taylor played in 13 special team snaps for the Broncos. Both of these guys had really solid training camps and preseasons last year. That's why they stuck around, but it's going to be a really tough competition for them to make the practice squad this year. That's likely the role that these guys are going to be competing for. Mario Goodrich was signed by the Denver Broncos. He played in the UFL this past spring. Former undrafted free agent a few years ago by the Philadelphia Eagles. Was on their Super Bowl losing team to the Kansas City Chiefs a couple of years ago. And then finally, Jaden Robinson, the undrafted free agent corner from Oregon State, and Joshua Pickett, the undrafted free agent corner from Duke. Really excited to see both of these guys perform in the preseason and in training camp to see if they might be able to stick a little bit more long-term here in Denver as potential practice squad guys, but I don't think that active roster is in the cards for either one of these players. All right, Broncos country, what are your thoughts on this cornerback room? Do you think that they are indeed the best cornerback room in the NFL, or do you think that they still have a ways to go to earn that title? Do you think that they have the potential to be a top 2 secondary in the NFL overall after viewing both the cornerback room and the safety room in these past 2 episodes? Drop those comments down below, guys. I would love to hear your thoughts as always. Be sure to leave a like on this video as well as subscribe and ring the bell so these videos appear in your notification feed. And until next time, guys, I'm your host, Gage Madrid, saying peace out.